morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Okay. I am pleased that you are all here. This is a massive undertaking. I am going to just ask you, put your hands together and give Andrew a round of applause. As Andrew said, we're happy you're here, and we've thanked so many people who've forgotten you. Don't worry, we've got all day to thank you for being here. I do know this is a beach weekend for many, so I am well aware that we are fortunate that you're sitting here. This is going to be a short session on how we came to be, just to give everyone So we have two ways of doing it. We can have everyone on this side. Sara, you want to come down and we'll let everyone introduce themselves. As you've heard, I'm Sharon Morrison. I've been at UNCG since 2001. I guess not a few years, I should say I'm retiring, but I know this is not work I'm going to retire from anytime soon. I know. But I would love to take a few moments. We'd like to sort of walk you through how we came to be and share a few memories with you at this point in time. So let me introduce you to our panel, starting with Dr. Shreeniwas.
Hi everybody, I'm Sudha Shreeniwas, professor in the Department of Human Development Family Studies in the School of HHS. And for the last almost 20 years, Dr. M and I, we came in at the same time to UNCG, and we have increasingly collaborated with the community and with each other ever since that time. She goes by Dr. M, I'm Dr. S. So we have worked on a variety of issues, but the heart of everything is that the communities approach us for technical partnership. So this is community-generated priorities, and the communities have voice in shaping the questions, the methods, and the dissemination, and in sharing resources. So I'll move it on to the others.
Hi everyone, my name is Melina Ksor. I am the current chair of the Community Advisory Council at MDA. I am a UNCG alum with the Human Health and Science Public Health Education department, and also an alum at Duke University in Population Health Sciences. So I currently do clinical research and have been doing research in undergrad at UNCG, which is kind of what put me in this precarious leadership role that I'm always sometimes not feeling like I'm qualified. But I am multi-tribal, so I am Chirag, Penang, and Panad. And I hope that you guys learned something and I learned something from you today. So.
Good morning. My name is Sara Colm, and I have the honor of being co-chair with Dr. M of the Research Network. My background is diverse, to put it mildly. I don't have a higher degree, so welcome to all the people who have learned their jobs in the field or on the job or in an emergency. I started out as a community organizer in San Francisco's Tenderloin District, which had all sorts of people there, from ex-felons to Southeast Asian refugees to senior citizens to everybody. I was a community organizer there for several years, then edited the neighborhood newspaper, Tenderloin Times, which was published in English, but also Cambodian, Lao, Vietnamese. I worked in Cambodia, moved there about 1992, and was based there for about 20 years during the peace process and the UN mission. And moved on from there in Cambodia still to focus a bit on upland indigenous people in Cambodia's northeast, Ratanakiri, Mondulkiri, bordering Central Highlands. And so there I was doing participatory action research as well as oral histories and some work for Human Rights Watch when Montagnard refugees started to flow across the border. So that's my background. I'm a journalist, advocate, activist. I tend to merge the different roles together. So my researcher role or my journalist role has always been motivated or resulting in action. And my advocacy has always been grounded firmly in well-researched facts and details. Thank you.
So what we'll do is I'll just walk us through a little bit of history and then have each person talk about where we are, how we've developed the kind of projects we have and what opportunities lay open, which you can hear more about later in the opportunities. Everyone here is a potential collaborator with somebody else. And I'm really encouraging you to get out of your comfort zone. I've met some people that I'm already talking to that have got ideas and they're not anywhere in my disciplinary area or in the practice of hiring. So I'm encouraging, come on and welcome. So I want to walk us back just a little bit of history. Now, as a researcher, your team usually looks like you've got the researchers, the PhDs or whatever, the masters. Then you've got your people who can do the methods. You got your statisticians and whatever. We are privileged to have a graphic designer who takes our fancy words and hit it like this. Y'all see that? That's it. That says 1,000 words. And this is taking us back, way back, 30 plus years. The Montagnard community has been here for 30 plus years. To the extent they've learned a lot, they've suffered a lot, and they've moved, but they've moved. So this incredible resilience. And I want to stress that throughout the day, that it's not just, okay, they've made a lot with what little we've given them, but it's just a fortitude to really care for each other and their communities. So it takes us back to arrival, and again, I thank our elders for being here, because the pictures of them when they got here has changed, but they're still young at heart. And it's on their backs that we do this work, and in paying it forward. So I just want you to take a look. And it really started out looking at health, because health is the gateway to many things, but health is everything. And so we took that on. I came in 2001, and when I got here summer 2002, we had a wave 600 plus Montagnards, and I volunteered. In fact, the person I shadowed is now a faculty member here, Dr. Meredith Powers, and I shadowed and helped with the resettlement back in 2002. So it's not that long ago that we've come. And look at some of the issues. And there's a pivotal moment, because if you think about it, we've been saying this for a long time. Time for a permanent bridge between American systems and community systems. And so this is where we are. So I wanted to just put that vision and that visual up there, because we still have this crater or chasm that community engaged work is trying to bridge this work. So I want to give you that visual. I also want to give you the genesis of this is, and this is Andrew, is an avid blogger and Facebooker, so I can steal his stuff. This is Andrew back in the day. Sorry, But this is a pivotal moment. In December 2011, we had a meeting with Montagnard doctors. Some of you don't know, many of the Montagnards sitting there are former doctors, trained as medical doctors, but can no longer practice. So they put their hopes and dreams into educating their children. So they're medical doctors, but you might see them in salons or as interpreters in many different ways, in factories and other places, taking care of family, doing what needs to be done. They're pastors, they're leaders, they're wisdom thinkers, thought people. So this is This was one of Moses' own, Dr. and Andrew. Andrew convened a group of medical doctors on the Montagnard side and the Moses Cone side. And we had, and Wally Bailey, who was in the audience, was there. Warren Sunwell, there was Dr. Jitna Durrad. Several of us were there to have that conversation. Out of that conversation came a list. And I was smiling the other day as I went through this because I saw my own handwriting on the board. So this was my chicken scratch back in 2011 with some of the issues. The bad news is we still have those issues. The good news is we're all in this room together. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So I just want to give you some background. And we've come forward and we have tackled some things. So we've had projects that started with looking at food insecurity, working with wonderful, wonderful community health workers. The community health worker model is the backbone of the work that's being done. And I could see some folks in this room who fit that commitment, and there are others to come. So I just wanted, that was the genesis of our research network, where we began to talk about how can we bring researchers and community together. In this meeting, we generated the issues, then we talked about the strategies, and we're still working through them today. So in that spirit, we have gone through a number of issues. We have launched projects such as looking at the food insecurity. We pivoted during COVID to work with the communities, and I use that. The Montagnard Association, but also Montagnard communities have built their capacity to now mentor other newcomers. And so we've got represented in this room the Karenni community. We've worked with the Bhutanese community. We've been working now, and we've building bridges to the Afghan community. So this is where we are. And we've brought a number of interdisciplinary researchers to the table from our area campuses, including, so I'm looking at Ksor, who I mentored from her freshman year at Guilford College all the way through to now she is a regional bigwig with refugee research. I'm just looking at, this is what we call the ripple effect of the work. And it goes beyond publications and reports. It's the ripple effect. And I'm looking at you, Maria, because you're in international programs, and I know that we've got a beautiful international community here. So you can sell students on getting the same bang for buck, just immersing themselves. And so I want to turn it over as we've evolved up to Sudha and then Melina, and then just having some background from Sara, who's been in the trenches on the other side. So if you take a few minutes just to, I know I've mentioned any other projects. I'll let Dr. Sudha talk about some of the focus areas.
These community leaders had been medically qualified in Vietnam, but could not practice here, but they knew what they were doing, they knew what they were seeing. So they wanted a pathway to document what was happening and the reasons why it was happening, and then use that information to lobby for resources for the community. And so from that was born the Montagnard Hypertension Research Project, and it involved collaboration with the community and across multiple departments, nutrition, public health, HDFS, with other institutions, Guilford College and A&T, biology departments. It involved training of how many students? I've honestly lost count, 45, 50?
Yeah, our youngest researcher at the time was 6 years old.
Yeah.
His sister was in university, she had to pick him up. So we had him measuring, reading the numbers when people stepped on scales. So if you came through the door, you were given work.
And we collected behavioral data, nutrition data, health data, family relationships, a lot of biometric data, height, weight, skin fold, blood pressure readings, and scalp hair to test for cortisol. And So we found a lot of things, including the role of chronic stress and some dietary issues where people's formerly healthy diets were being shaped because of dislocation from traditional food sources to what is available here, and the role of lower income, so what is affordable here. These things played a role, as did stress, depressive symptoms, and I mean, wherever you looked, you found something basically. The next set of issues we looked at was that the community for many years had realized that there is no formal count of the population. Unlike the Hmong community, who are present in several states and therefore have more opportunities to have a voice in the system, Montagnards are mostly concentrated in North Carolina. They do not appear in any federal, state, or local data collection efforts under their ethnic name. They are combined with other Asian origin groups, and so their unique needs are masked. So we needed a count of the numbers of the community. And so Andrew was driving that bus a lot. There were multiple methods we were thinking: analysis of names from driver licenses of high school students in this area, piloting a mini census from door to door in some of the higher concentration communities. And this would also give the community some practice and encouragement to participate in the big decennial US census, where they had an opportunity to write their name in that section on race and ethnicity. All of those were launching really well, and then COVID happened, and so this is something that's going to have to go back down and then come back up later. Dr. M already mentioned that mental health is one of the big priorities of the community, especially intergenerationally, as generational trauma is experienced and passed down, and also the lack of culturally and linguistically trained and trauma-informed mental health professionals. Big gap. So anybody who is in a position to talk to rising youth about career options, this is really an area of one of the biggest needs. And the last one I'll mention is that I'm not sure nationally, but certainly in all of North Carolina, there has not been a needs assessment conducted of the needs of diverse older adults. Charlotte-Mecklenburg County had done a needs assessment of just all older persons in the area, but did not look at certain specific and unique needs of newcomer older persons. So we conducted 2 pioneering needs assessments of older refugee origin adults in the Triad area, I mean mostly Guilford County, but the Triad area. We looked at the Montagnards, who are a long-established community, 30, 40 years. And we also looked at 2 more newcomer communities, the Nepali-speaking Bhutanese and the Congolese. And various things were found, but as Dr. M pointed out in the beginning, the things that were said 30 years ago are still being said. So there are areas where there's gaps in services, and there are gaps in the pathway to existing services. And then there's the knowledge and the engagement with services. So there's a lot of mind the gap scenarios. So these are some of the areas our lab has worked on. And we're all about training students. Particularly, we welcome undergraduates. I mean, we've lost count of the numbers who've gone through our doors of all majors.
Yeah. Got people from media studies, art, I mean, we've had
Art, biology, peace and conflict, HDFS, public health, I mean, can't even, and all sorts of career paths there.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. S. So a couple of things that CAC is working on. We have a partner with Truman University. And as we brought up, there are gaps in language access, meaning there are words in medical jargon, financial jargon, that we just do not have the word for, and we are just making it up as we go, essentially, right? So one of the big things that we're trying to kind of model after, you looking at indigenous cultures here, such as the Cherokee and other Native American groups, is how can we get some elderly individuals, young adults, to kind of work together to have some kind of cohesiveness in how things are defined. But before we're able to do that, Montagnards do not have any of their history captured. This becomes very, very difficult when you are navigating systems, when you can't even really define your own identities, your stories, your histories, fables, religion, and kind of what you come from. One of the things that we're kind of actively doing right now is kind of asking our community members, what do you want to share? What's a story you want to share? It could be a bedtime story. It could be a story about how weddings were done. It could be a story about how childbirth comes about and the processes of these. Right now, there's none of that captured. It's always been a word of mouth. During my undergrad, while working with that older needs assessment, kind of a pilot, my family was actually one of the pilot families that we captured these oral history from. My grandfather, who served alongside Special Forces, he passed away 2 years ago at the age of 110, had a whole lot to say. And you actually can Google him on YouTube and you'll see videos of him speaking, because a lot of people, even outside of the United States, have made Zoom calls to hear his story and his perceptions and what he knows about the Montagnard culture, because it just doesn't have any record. But it becomes very difficult to navigate this, because if you know about Montagnard people, you know that there's a lot of trauma that ties to their origins of coming to the United States. So how do you navigate these conversations? Community health workers, volunteers in our Montagnard community, often young adults, sometimes those part of the sandwich community, sandwich generation, are taking time to basically, oftentimes unpaid, to do this work because it matters, and it's because it's our history. And now we're kind of like tethering on these ideas of like, well, we need these funding. This is important. But where do we start? What are the connections that we need? How can we actively kind of compensate the workers that are doing this basically for free and the volunteers that are doing all of this work, while also kind of being equitable of, the participants that are taking their time to almost break barriers and relive some traumatic things. And yeah, so that's basically things that CAC is working on now. It's still a growing and difficult process because we're going through some issues again with universities and funding. But CAC, which we're developing, will hopefully serve as a wonderful resource for any future researchers, historians, individuals who are looking to learn about Montagnard communities, as a way to have those conversations. Because essentially these CAC members are what can be the voice for those who are unheard. Yeah, so that's kind of my soapbox. And if you are very interested in learning more about these types of, documentations and oral history, because essentially that's kind of what drives everything, communication. And right now we just don't have cohesive language for interpretation. So as you can imagine, continuum care or understanding of diseases, as we documented up there, but she wrote 30 years ago, continues to be a problem because no real language is used constantly. We always have a word for like X-ray or, a word for MRIs and screenings, and what is a prostate screening or what is a breast cancer screening? What is a screening? Montagnards don't really have a good way of defining that. And this is a huge opportunity for research to put some money in that, look at models that exist, and then look at the community members that are already doing the work to continue to refine that work. I'll pass it to Sara.
Thanks. Yeah, I think what I want to offer are just some of the questions that I have and that I think we will be addressing, I hope we'll be addressing during the day. One is, how do we involve research subjects in the research as essentially partners or co-creators rather than being passive sources or victims? Human rights organizations often talk about victim testimony. How can we get beyond not just those words, but practices that enforce sort of the separation of folks being researched and others gathering information? That's one question. Another question is how can we get the research off the shelf, out from behind academic firewalls, off the internet and into action? Part of that, as I think I mentioned earlier, is the importance of, in doing the research, is to research sound recommendations for policy and action that can be driven into implementation. If you have a bunch of facts and sad stories or whatever, I believe it's important to do something with the information along with the lines of the people who tell you the story. So the community is telling you the problems. It's important to actually help them voice their problems and what they see as solutions. And we'll get into that in the oral history session later and Melina's session. Third question is, how do we address protection issues for people that we're working with and their families back home, beyond getting them to sign sort of pro forma informed consent documents? This is a real concern. We're here in Greensboro. You can interview someone here, a Montagnard, or Melina can interview someone here. She is a Montagnard. What's the implication back home of a person's photograph and what they say being public back home? It can have very serious implications or reprisals from the government on folks back home. And that's something to never forget. If you're in country doing research, it's all the more important. And I used to spend 15 or 20 minutes just going over informed consent with people, just to make sure that they really understood. And then the afternoon panel will have a couple of folks from the Montagnard community discussing challenges and opportunities in collecting oral histories or researching your own communities. I think that one of the essential questions then is, who owns the research? Especially once it's been completed, what happens to that research? Where does it go? Does it come back to the community for comment or for a slideshow, for discussion, a party? Does it go on, MDA's webpage? It's a great place, or Facebook page. What happens when the research is so old that it's going to be archived? Who has access to those archives, and how do they get it? And finally, is there such a thing as objective research that's neutral? Should researchers be disengaged from what they're studying? And I would argue that this is a very key question in academia, that anthropology in the past has been very much being distant from your subjects. But the question is it actually incumbent on socially engaged researchers to get involved? And so I'll end with those questions and hope we come up with some answers during the day. Thank you.